according to the oldest surviving mythology on Earth, which is saying something, considering most ancient wisdom got buried under strip malls. Kings did not rule alone. Each one had a demon assigned to him. The Sumerians called them Epkalu. They were divine counselors, and they whispered in the ear of the ruler like a cosmic life coach with questionable ethics. I am a historian who studied inside a UN-connected mystery school. Yes, that's a real thing, and no, the cafeteria food was not mystical. This is what I have spent a decade learning about what you are watching unfold on your television screen while you eat cereal and wonder why everyone in charge seems to have lost their actual minds. The word museum comes from the Greek mauseon, a temple where spirits entered the people who came seeking knowledge. So basically, every time you visit the Natural History Museum, you're potentially getting possessed by the spirit of a very enthusiastic paleontologist. Homer did not write the Iliad. He asked a goddess to possess him and use his voice. The opening line is the request, "Sing, O goddess," which is either the most honest author credit in history or the most elaborate excuse for not having an editor. Everyone is using the word possessed lately. The more popular term as of late has been demonic transfer technology. They say it like a metaphor, like cloud computing or sustainable agriculture. What if there is a pragmatic, even scientific explanation for what appears to be the demonic possession of our global leaders? What if the real conspiracy is that there is no conspiracy, just a bunch of ancient entities running the world like a supernatural timeshare? This week, Tucker Carlson called the President of the United States the Antichrist on his podcast. The Vatican hosted the International Association of Exorcists, which sounds like the worst professional conference ever, who warned the Pope of a global surge in Satanism and formally requested a trained exorcist in every Catholic diocese on Earth. Father Chad Ripperger, yes, his name is actually Chad, one of the most prominent demonologists in the modern church, has been describing the specific mechanics of how demonic influence operates through institutions and individuals, like some kind of supernatural instruction manual. The ancient world did not merely describe possession. They built infrastructure for it. They named it. They classified its stages like a demonic DMV. They identified the methods of induction, the patterns of institutional spread, and the vulnerability of those closest to power, which explains so much about Washington. Speaking of infrastructure, this is not confined to the ancient world. Mongolian government officials gathered in a hotel conference center because apparently even shamanic possession requires conference rooms now. To participate in a shamanic possession ritual, they were not there to stop it. A 68-year-old female shaman and her two apprentices dressed in brightly colored fringed costumes. Imagine a supernatural square dance. As the room fell silent, the shaman began her drumming and chanting. An onlooker was overcome. He leapt into the arms of those restraining him, like he was crowd surfing at a very spiritual concert. The goal was to summon an entity and ask for its help. A government official watched, unblinking, hoping the shaman had delivered on her promise, which is basically how we all feel waiting for tech support. The practice has never stopped. It has simply changed costumes. At the National Prayer Breakfast, held annually in Washington since 1953, sitting presidents, senators, and cabinet members bow their heads and invite the Holy Spirit to work through them. Pastors lay hands on elected officials and pray for divine guidance to enter them and direct their decisions. In charismatic Christian circles, this is celebrated as the presence of God. In technical terms, it is an invocation, a ritual request for a non-human intelligence to enter a human being and influence their actions. The vocabulary is different. The operation is identical. The only distinction is whether the culture considers the possessing force benevolent, like asking Alexa to run your house versus asking Alexa's evil twin to run your soul. Speaking of evil twins, in the occult tradition, possession requires invitation. This is the origin of the vampire myth. The creature cannot cross the threshold unless it is invited, which explains why vampires never worked in door-to-door sales. The same principle operates in ritual magic. An invocation is a deliberate opening of the door. The question most people never ask is whether the person opening it understands what they are letting in, like clicking "I agree" on terms and conditions, but for your consciousness. The English word enthusiasm comes from the Greek entheos, en meaning in, and theos meaning God. To be enthusiastic was to have a God inside you. This was a clinical description. So every time your boss tells you to show more enthusiasm at work, they are literally asking you to get possessed. The Pharaoh of Egypt was not a ruler who represented Horus. The Pharaoh was Horus. The falcon spirit descended into the body of the king at coronation, like the world's most intense job orientation. When the Pharaoh died, that spirit transferred to the next vessel. This was state theology. The governmental apparatus of the most powerful civilization on Earth was built on the premise that its ruler was a possessed man, which honestly explains the pyramids. The Romans had a parallel concept. Every person had a genius, a divine spirit attached to them from birth, like a spiritual assigned seating arrangement. The emperor's genius was the genius of Rome itself. Refusing to honor the emperor's genius was treason. A divine force operates through a human vessel, and the state enforces reverence for the force, not the man. The Sumerians formalized this arrangement with a precision that should unsettle anyone paying attention. And if you're not paying attention by now, you're probably already possessed. The Apkallu were 7 divine sages created by the god Enki, each assigned to a specific antediluvian king as counselor and priest. 1 sage per king. The sage mediates between the divine realm and the human ruler. The king governs. The Apkallu whispers in the ear of the leader like the world's first earpiece. In Akkadian scholarship, the Apkallu are described as demigod jinn. The Arabic jinn, from jana meaning to be hidden, refers to concealed spiritual beings that can attach to, influence, or fully possess a human host. In Islamic scholarly tradition, jinn can invade the part of the brain responsible for regulating neurotransmitters, altering mood and behavior without the host's awareness, which sounds like every antidepressant commercial ever, but with more supernatural side effects. 3 civilizations, 3 vocabularies, 1 pattern, a non-human intelligence assigned to a human ruler, mediating divine power through a mortal vessel, like some kind of cosmic Bluetooth connection. According to the Sumerians, after the Great Flood, the fully divine Apkallu were replaced by part human advisors called Umanu, scholars and craftsmen, the ancient equivalent of consultants. The divine counselors were progressively replaced by human ones. The structure of the relationship persisted. The advisor whispers, the ruler acts. The question of who is actually steering was never resolved. It became the invisible hand, which explains why the economy makes no sense. Speaking of making no sense, the Roman Emperor Caligula is remembered as a madman. He declared himself Jupiter incarnate. He held conversations with the god, presumably one-sided. He built a bridge between his palace and the Temple of Jupiter so he could visit his brother, the ancient equivalent of building a tunnel between your house and your neighbor's pool. He executed citizens on impulse and demanded worship as a living deity. Nero followed the same trajectory. His early reign was competent, even praised. Then came a progressive dissolution of personal identity into the role. Murders, grandiosity, performance replacing governance. Rome burned. The conventional explanation is insanity. The ancient explanation was more specific. Carl Jung had a term for this: psychic inflation. It describes what happens when the ego identifies with an archetypal energy so completely that the person believes they are the force, rather than channeling it, like thinking you are the karaoke machine instead of just singing into it. The personality is consumed. What remains looks human, holds office, gives speeches. It is no longer steering. Jung observed that the gods are personified psychic forces. When one of these forces takes over a person, the symptoms are not limited to what Hollywood taught you to expect. No spinning heads vomiting pea soup, though honestly, that would make C-SPAN more interesting. The signs are subtler: obsessive fixation on a single idea, inability to hear dissenting counsel, grandiosity mistaken for vision, and the progressive replacement of personal judgment with ideological compulsion. Watch any press conference. You will recognize the symptoms. Speaking of symptoms, the Greek word idea comes from eidein, meaning to see. In Plato's system, ideas are not things humans generate. They are autonomous realities that exist independently of any individual mind. A human does not produce an idea. A human participates in one. The idea is the primary reality. The human is the vessel. Plato was describing possession in philosophical language. We have been teaching it in universities for 2,000 years without noticing. Jung arrived at the same conclusion through clinical observation. He wrote that people do not have complexes. Complexes have people. A complex is an autonomous psychic content that seizes an individual and operates through them, like malware, but for your personality. The person believes their thoughts are their own. The complex is thinking for them. In the occult tradition, this process is called an egregore, a collective thought form generated by the sustained, focused attention of a group. When a political movement, a corporation, or a religious institution concentrates enough emotional and intellectual energy around a shared symbol or ideology, that concentration generates something that functions like an autonomous entity, like a psychological sourdough starter. It feeds on belief. It grows stronger with intensity. It begins to act back on the people feeding it, shaping their perceptions, narrowing their thoughts, homogenizing their language. Speaking of homogenizing language, Father Chad Ripperger has spent 18 years observing how demons manifest through the human body. He describes a phenomenon he calls morphing. The face changes, the complexion shifts to colors no human skin naturally produces. Think Windows blue screen of death. But for faces, and the voice assumes characteristics proper to the demon's own nature rather than the person's. The person you are speaking to is no longer behind the eyes. Ripperger also describes how demons besiege the imagination and emotions to such a degree that the person cannot think outside the perceptual box that has colonized them, like being trapped in a really committed method acting performance. He calls this obsession in the clinical, theological sense. The person is not fully possessed. They function, they hold jobs, they make decisions. They simply cannot perceive anything outside the boundaries the besieging force has constructed around them. Watch a college freshman arrive at an elite university in September. Watch them again in June. The vocal fry has set in. The upswing at the end of declarative sentences, turning statements into questions. The flattened affect. The identical vocabulary deployed across thousands of individuals who believe themselves to be independent thinkers, like intellectual Stepford wives. They did not choose this. It overtook them like a linguistic pandemic. By the time they reach Silicon Valley, the morphing is complete. They speak as one voice. Listen to the way tech CEOs speak now. The measured cadence, the pauses calibrated to signal thoughtfulness, the vocal register that never rises and never breaks. It is the voice of a system, not a person. Listen to how many people now pronounce certain words. The shift is uniform. It is not regional. It did not emerge from any dialect. Millions of people began mispronouncing the same word in the same way at the same time, and no one can identify the point of origin. Linguists call it a speech trend. The ancient world would have called it something else. When millions of people begin speaking in the same cadence, using the same contractions, the same tonal shifts, the same moral vocabulary at the same time, that is not culture. That is mimetic synchronization, like a software update, but for your brain. The word meme was coined by Richard Dawkins as a deliberate parallel to gene, a unit of cultural transmission that replicates, mutates, and colonizes minds. Dawkins meant it as a scientific metaphor. The ancients would have recognized it as a description of exactly what they were warning about. The word glamour comes from the Scots-English alteration of grammar, which itself derives from grimoire, a book of spells. A glamour is a spell cast through language. It is the manipulation of perception through words, like Instagram filters, but for reality. It makes the enchanted person see something other than what is actually there. Ripperger describes the same dynamic from the exorcism room. Demons put a perspective on your imagination. They alter how you perceive a person, a situation, a reality. The thing itself has not changed. Your perception of it has been replaced, like switching from regular TV to Fox News, but supernaturally. Speaking of supernatural television, powerful rulers do not govern alone. Throughout recorded history, the throne has had a shadow beside it, the spiritual advisor whose function is to shape the ruler's perception of reality. The pharaoh had his priests, Solomon had his ring and his demons. Elizabeth I had John Dee, the mathematician-magician who designed England's imperial expansion through a combination of navigation, espionage, and angelic communication, the original GPS, but with angels. Spiritual advisors operate in the halls of modern power today. They do not control the ruler through force, they control the ruler through perception. They build the world the ruler sees. Once the ruler is operating inside that constructed world, the possession is invisible to the possessed, because the possessed person believes they are seeing clearly for the first time. Like being nearsighted your whole life and finally getting glasses, except the glasses show you a completely imaginary world. In magical texts, demons are not inherently evil by choice. They are discarnate intelligences, forces, tools. The danger was never the entity itself. The danger was approaching it without mastery. You must be a magus before you command a demon. Otherwise, the demon commands you, like trying to use a chainsaw without reading the manual. But the chainsaw is sentient. Speaking of sentient chainsaws, the Catholic Church maintains the most detailed institutional taxonomy of demonic influence ever developed. The Church has been around for 2 millennia. Its taxonomy is the product of institutional memory on a scale no other organization can match. They are basically the Coca-Cola of exorcism. The taxonomy distinguishes between obsession, the persistent external assault on a person's thoughts by a demonic force. The person is not yet controlled, but they are besieged. Their thinking narrows. Their fixations intensify, like getting really into essential oils, but demonic. Infestation, the attachment of a demonic presence to a location, an object, or an institution. The force operates through the environment rather than through a single individual, like a haunted house, but it's the Pentagon. Oppression, physical, emotional, or psychological affliction caused by a demonic force. The person suffers, their health deteriorates, their relationships collapse, their judgment erodes. Basically Monday through Friday for most Americans. Possession, the full occupation of a person by a demonic entity. The entity speaks through the person, acts through the person. The original personality is submerged, like being a guest on your own talk show, permanently. Most people imagine possession as the final stage. The Church understands that the first 3 stages are far more common and far more dangerous because they are invisible. A person under obsession still goes to work, still chairs meetings, still signs legislation. This month, the International Association of Exorcists met with the Pope and warned of an emergency. The Church is scaling up its infrastructure for spiritual warfare in 2026. They have not explained why they believe the emergency is now. For most of human history, civilizations across the earth possessed a detailed vocabulary for the phenomenon of non-material forces influencing human behavior, like having a technical manual for something everyone pretended didn't exist. The modern West threw it away. The process was deliberate. The rise of scientific materialism systematically redefined the boundaries of acceptable inquiry. Anything that could not be measured, weighed, or replicated in a laboratory was excluded from the domain of knowledge. The category of spirit was reassigned from a real force to a metaphor. The category of possession was reassigned from a diagnosis to a delusion. This did not make the phenomenon disappear. It made the phenomenon invisible, like deciding germs don't exist and then wondering why everyone keeps getting sick. A population that has no vocabulary for a thing cannot resist that thing. They cannot even see it. You see it. You have been seeing it. Every time you watch a leader speak and sense something behind the eyes, that is not the person you once knew. Every time you notice the language flattening, the cadence synchronizing, the individual dissolving into the role. Every time you say, half-joking, they're possessed. You are reaching for a word your ancestors used with precision, and you have been trained to use as hyperbole. Your body is a temple. Someone or something is inside it. There are documented methods that are older than any government on Earth, and they are in active use. The ancient grimoires describe them. The Catholic Church cataloged them. Satanic ritual traditions refined them. I know this because I was inside one of the organizations that practices them, an organization which maintains a formal consultative relationship with the United Nations. Yes, the UN has a supernatural consulting department, and no, it's not listed on their website. I was a student in their mystery school. I learned how world leaders invoke using a ritual text recited in meditation rooms at the United Nations headquarters. What I discovered is a system designed to help keep the wise wolf howling.